After his weird question, Gojo had been surprisingly silent for a while. Momo and even Toshiro had been a little worried. After all, even though it has only been a few hours since they knew him, they could see that he was somewhat shocked. Gojo, of course, remarked that he was worrying them. But he was simply too busy thinking to care. After asking Momo a few more questions, he was sure that the two of them had without a doubt lived and died in Japan. Though he was surprised to learn that they died during the feudal era. They lived in Japan without a doubt. It was one thing for them to not learn about curses when they were alive, since jujitsu sorcerers always did their best to hide things from the normals. But it was weird for Momo to not know about it after entering an academy that formed soldiers. Then, he deducted two possibilities. 1. Curses were a high-grade secret that first-year students couldn't know. But the existence of hollows made this impossible. Then, the second and most likely was that he was in the afterlife of a parallel dimension. When you erase all possibilities, even the most impossible become reality. Once his thoughts reached this conclusion, he couldn't help but feel a little lost. One of the reasons he had decided to become a Shinigami because he wanted to see what happened in the living world. But now that this goal was most likely impossible, he didn't know what to do. Gojo-san? Are you alright? Hinamori knew it was a stupid question, but she couldn't help it. Giving a reassuring smile, he patted her head. Do not worry. I am more than alright. Moping was useless. Reality couldn't change just because he was unwilling to accept or unable to advance. What's more, if he landed here, it meant that it wasn't impossible to do the opposite. Wasn't it just traveling through dimension? He was Satoru Gojo and there was nothing impossible to him. I still need to first become a Shinigami to have more access to information or secrets. I also need to recuperate Limitless. Well, let's go. Meanwhile, at the place where Gojo eliminated the hollow, a group of 6 people wearing black kimonos with kahana sheathed at their side examined the scene. One of them, a blonde petite girl with gray eyes, asked, Vice Captain Shiba, what is happening? The man named Shiba, a tall man with spiky black hair, was frowning as he looked at the scorched earth all around him. From the trace of battle, it's clear that the enemy was a hollow. As for the one who erased him, he should at least be between the 3rd seat and vice captain level. Shiba couldn't help but frown. For one, a hollow shouldn't have appeared in the 1st district. But this could be chalked to inattention. The problem was the one who erased this hollow. Ryatsu was like an identity card or a digital imprint. There were no two completely similar Ryatsu. Since he was a vice captain himself, he knew the Ryatsu of all seated officers from the Gotei 13. Be it captains, vice captains, or lieutenants. He briefly considered the Kido Corps or the Secret Force, but it was close to impossible since they didn't leave the Suriitii without a very good reason. What's more, there should be no one of such level in the Kido or Secret Forces aside from Captain Soifan or her Vice Captain Marekio Omida. This is troubling. Murmuring under his breath, he began to scratch his hair. Well, let's enter the 1st district. Vice Captain Ranjika should still be stationed there. We will ask her if she detected anything wrong. Yes. All the Shinigami present saluted before vanishing from where they stood in a burst of speed. First West District. The 1st district wasn't particularly different from the previous one. In his eyes, it still looked like a feudal village. What really surprised him though was that at the end of the village, on the other shore of the river, one could already see some building of what he supposed was the Suriitii. Pointing in the direction, he asked, Hey, Momo, is that the Suriitii? If so, why does no one here enter? Momo gave a bitter smile. Even though it looks like this, if anyone tries to intrude, a great barrier would appear. There are 4 gates, one for each district, and each gate has a gatekeeper. At the mention of the gatekeeper, her smile became happier. He is called Jidanbo Ikanzaka. He is a little brutish, but he is really liked by most people here. Well, you will learn all that when you enter the academy. Raising her head, she looked at the setting with scrunched brows. It's becoming late. what should I do? Toshiro, who had stayed silent until now, knew what was worrying her. Go make your report. I will take care of him. Grandmother won't object since he saved us. Hinamori hesitated for a short while before turning towards Gojo. Gojo-san, what do you think? Gojo didn't particularly care either way, even sleeping under the stars didn't bother him. I am good. Then, bowing towards him in a full 90 degrees bow, thank you for saving our lives. Raising her body, she waved as she began to run. Shiro, Gojo-san, I need to make a report, see you later. Watching her leave like this, Gojo shook his head while giving a slight smile. He was having a serious headache recently. Even though his new body seemed stronger, keeping the Rokugan active without any blindfold or the like was really draining on his mental faculty. So, kid, let's go? Toshiro nodded quietly before walking ahead. He was someone quiet by nature. The only reason he had been so rash at first was because his emotions were still high after nearly facing death. Watching the young and small back in front of him, Gojo raised his head before letting out a sigh. Soon, he would enter the academy, making him one step closer to his goal. While the sun slowly rose in the sky, somewhere not far from the first district of the Rokangai, there lay a house that had a rather peculiar decoration. 4 people were sitting while facing each other. There were 2 men and 2 women. The first man had black hair and was wearing an equally black kimono with a vice captain badge on his arm and looked at the rest as he spoke. What brings you here, big brother? You should know that this district isn't currently under your jurisdiction. His expression was stern and serious as he said those words. He was Kaiin Shiba, the vice captain of the 13th Division. Facing him was a clearly older man with similar hair color and traits. It was easy to see that the two were related. Still, 2 big things differentiated them. The first one was the sloppy way he was sitting, as if everything was simply a bother. The second thing was the large white cloak with the number 10 inscribed in kanji on the back. He was Isshin Shiba, captain of the 10th Division. Facing his somewhat serious brother, Isshin could only smile bitterly. In the Soul Society, the 4 great noble families were known to all. Families so powerful that even the Central 46, the governing body of the Soul Society, had to respect them. They were the Shihoin, the Kuchiki, the Ise, and the Tsuneyashiro. What few people knew was that in reality there weren't 4, but rather 5 great families. The Shiba being one of them. Sadly, for some unknown reason, the Shiba family lost its status and worse, was even booted out of the Suriitii. Currently, since the eldest son of the family was a captain, it should have been possible to at least reinstate the family as a minor noble. Sadly, nothing of the sort happened. For how long are you going to be angry? You know very well that I am not interested in becoming the head of the family. Kano shook his head. This isn't the reason. Though I hated you because of this in the past, after entering the 13th Division, I understood how deep the waters in the Suriitii were. What simply pisses me off is seeing you act like some tragic heroine who sacrificed herself for the family. A vein popped out on his forehead when he heard this. The muffled laugh from the 2 women present didn't help. Kukako, Ranjiku, don't tell me you find it funny? Kukaka Shiba, a black-haired young woman with rather enticing curves, covered her mouth as she shook her head. Her green eyes were flashing with amusement, but she didn't wish to further shame her eldest brother. Ranjiku Matsumoto, the vice captain of the 10th Division on the other hand, was already laughing out loud. Her long blonde hair swayed as her incredibly large breasts heaved. The 2 women's clothes revealed quite a bit of cleavage. But, even though Kukaku was by no means small, Ranjiku was simply on another level altogether. Ignoring the laughing duo since he was already used to their antics, Kaiin looked back at his brother. So, answer me, why are you here? Scratching his head, Isshin sighed before continuing, the geezer sent me after we received the report from that trainee. It's already weird enough for a hollow to appear in the first district, but the fact that a new soul could supposedly use Kido after just one look is unheard of. It has already been 3 days since Momo made her report. Kaiin couldn't help but frown. What about my captain? Well, you know how bad his health is. He had a problem during the reunion. What? Kyan immediately rose from his position. It was well known that the captain of the 13th Division, Joshiro Yukite, despite being one of the oldest captains, also had a very fragile health. Don't worry. That double-faced psycho took care of him. Kyan let out a sigh of relief. He knew who his brother was talking about. Retsu Unohana, the captain of the 4th Division and the best healer of the Soul Society. Sitting back, he let out a sigh of relief. I see, if he is in the hands of Captain Unohana, then we have nothing to worry about. Still, why are you always insulting her? Even though I admit that she can be somewhat rough during her treatment, I don't think she is two-faced. Haha, if only you knew. Like Yukite, Ishin was also one of the oldest captains in the Soul Society. But compared to Unohana, he could only calm himself as a junior. After all, she was nearly as old as the captain commander, making her a woman more than 2,000 years old. But this wasn't all. He knew very well that the captain of the 4th Division hadn't always been the gentle and warm woman she portrayed herself to be. The fact that she was the first Kenpachi as well as the first captain of the 11th Division was enough to prove how violent and bloodthirsty she was. What's more, before becoming a founding member of the Gotai 13, she was known as one of the most diabolical criminals in the Soul Society. Still, this was something of an unofficial secret, and since he didn't want to receive a visit from that crazy psycho, he decided to change subject. Forget it. Anyway, we and the 2nd Division received the mission. First, we are to monitor him to verify if he really has a level equal or superior to a seated officer. Second, if we determine that it's indeed the case, we have to determine his tendencies. If he is clean, we are to make sure that he enters the academy. Someone as talented as him would be interesting to have. What if he is dangerous? Kyan asked. Then, we kill him. Sneeze. Somewhere else in the Rukangai, a silver-haired man who was standing with his torso naked and had many white bandages covering his eyes sneezed a little. Man, is someone talking behind my back? Or perhaps you are just cold because you are standing like an exhibitionist so soon in the morning? An equally silver-haired boy, who could pass for his brother, remarked sarcastically while munching on a slice of watermelon. They were of course Gojo Satoru and Toshiro Hitsugaya. Gojo didn't seem bothered by the sarcasm and simply wiggled his finger, TCH. 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 You don't understand. My body is a true work of art. You should be happy to be in the first seat to appreciate it. Don't you think so, Momo? Momo, who was also happily munching on her watermelon, was startled at being called on, then looking back at Gojo's well-defined body, she could simply nod while blushing. It wasn't as if it was the first time she saw a man without his shirt on. After all, most Shinigami were men. It was a rather common sight in the academy. Still, she had to admit that she wasn't used to seeing a man like that too up close. It was even more so since Gojo was extremely shameless and would always tease her one way or another. E/N, I would say pedophilia, but we all know she's basically a loli baba. In the 3 days they passed together, the three of them became rather close and quite friendly. Gojo, having his ego soothed, once again went back to doing his routines. Because of his new body, even though it seemed similar to his previous one, there were many little differences. As such, he needed training to get back the control he had in the past. Well, Momo, finish your snack and come. I am done warming up. Momo buried her head deeper in the watermelon and finished it in one gulp before rushing toward Gojo. Another thing that happened during those 3 days was that Hinamori would always train with Gojo. Even though it has only been 3 short days, her ways of moving, breathing, and situational awareness were at a completely different level from 3 days ago. After all, even though her understanding of Kido surpassed Gojo for now, the fact that he had been fighting against curses for more than 10 years back when he was alive was something that would vanish. By imparting those experiences to Momo, he was changing what was already a genius into a monster. After a few hours of training, Gojo stretched a little before leaving the sweating and heaving Momo. Well, I need to do something. Repeat some level low Bakudo. Shiro, don't let her slack off. Hey! Toshiro waved his hand disinterestedly while Momo began to execute herself. After leaving the two kids who somehow became his students before he understood what was happening, Gojo left the compound and headed somewhere. It took him a few short minutes before he reached a rather remote zone. Once there, he stopped and began to stretch a little. Well. I don't know who you are, but don't you think it's rather impolite to spy on people? Silence was the only answer he received. Before a bunch of ninja-like soldiers appeared all around him, effectively surrounding him. But Gojo didn't even spare a glance at them. His eyes, even though covered, were fixated in one direction. From that place, a massive man holding a bag of chips and a short woman wearing the same black clothes with a white haori slowly appeared. I am surprised. To think we would be discovered so fast. The woman looked at him, curiosity clearly evident in her eyes. Initially, she didn't have to take this mission, but she wished to use this occasion to train some new recruits of the secret force. Now though, it seemed that this mission was going to be more entertaining than she thought. Gojo, meanwhile, showed a serious expression for the first time in a while. Even though the two in front of him were containing their powers, he was sure of it. Those two were strong. A grin formed on his face. Well, things suddenly became way more interesting. Soifan, captain of the 2nd Division of the Gotiai 13 and commandant of the secret force, was attentively observing the man known as Satoru Gojo, and she had only one thought. I don't like him. Aside from him being relatively handsome and his power being too large for a new soul, what really irked her was his nonchalance. The way he spoke and the hidden arrogance in his words. Everything made her remember one man. That bastard Kissa. It has already been close to 60 years since he fled from the Siriidii with her mistress. Even after 60 years, just remembering this made her want to scream in rage. Let's focus. She immediately decided to not face this man. She wasn't just a little guard following the princess, like in the past. Because of her position, it was necessary for her to not mix feelings and work. This outing was supposed to be a test for the newbies. I can't say that they failed since even the two of us were discovered. Should I have them fight against him? She pondered a little. The mission was only supposed to enter the extermination phase if the man was dangerous. Sadly, they weren't able to see enough to determine whether he was a dangerous element or a talent to pull in. What's more, if she handled the situation wrongly, she could push him away from them even if he hadn't wished so initially. If I fail my mission on the first day, the Captain Commander is going to kill me. Gojo, feeling no hostility coming from the people surrounding him, understood that they were just supposed to observe him. Ah! Man, don't tell me I made a mistake. The cliché scene of a guy going in a dark alley and calling out people tailing him before proceeding to beat them like a Chad was always so cool in movies. Why did he fail at the very first step? The situation fell into an awkward lull. Neither side quite knowing how to act. One could even feel a slightly cold wind flow into the scene. Scratching his head, Gojo proposed, look, how about we act as if nothing happened? You guys go do whatever you were doing, and I am going to act as if I didn't see you. Deal? Looking at Gojo with a deadpan expression, Soifan once again wondered how someone could have such a punchable face. What she didn't expect was that one of her soldiers couldn't hold himself back and rushed behind the man called Gojo by using a shuunpa. Even though he was incredibly fast, for her, he was so slow she could see each of his movements quite clearly. That idiot. She cursed and was about to rush to stop this action, before stopping dead in her tracks as she saw what Gojo was about to do. He smiled leisurely while taking 2 steps to the side and avoiding the hit that, while not fatal, would have surely wounded him. This was followed by a twirl, then one full blow to the stomach. In just a few seconds, one of her so-called elites was taken down by some new soul without even being given a chance to counterattack. How did you stop him? Soifan questioned while being baffled. None of his movements were particularly fast. In fact, he simply moved a little faster than normal people. Despite this, her soldier was not even able to retaliate. Gojo smiled at this question and raised his eye cover, showing one set of beautiful blue eyes shining like jewels. It's easy if you can see. You dash. Gnashing her teeth at this remark, she waved her hand, signaling to 4 others to attack without the intention to harm him. Gojo simply shrugged at this and put the eye cover back down. I wasn't lying though. In his world, all members of the Gojo clan could more or less use Limitless. But only when Limitless and the Rokugan were linked can they bring out the greatest potential. Limitless was, in a crude way of speaking, a kind of time-space manipulation. But the Rokugan didn't fall behind. One of the best abilities was the one which allowed the user to perceive a moment of reality as if it was over 1 minute in his mind. This was an extremely powerful ability to use during combat, because even a single second could change the outcome. Ha ha. Man, those guys sure are jumpy. In his current world, the world only he could see, all colors slowly faded until all that was left was a monochromatic white and black. Some people might think that it was some weird power, but in fact, they would be wrong to assume so. Oh. This is really good. Laughing, Gojo slowly watched as all the people jumping towards him appeared as if they were slowed down. Those guys were so straightforward that it was hilarious. What's more, his current body was far stronger than his old one. Thanks to this, he was able to use more power than in the past. Well, if I had Limitless I wouldn't even need to dodge. While leisurely thinking about how he would recover Limitless, he began to act. What happened next was something Soifan could not understand. In the past, she had served as Princess Yoruchi's personal guard and was a witness to how her princess went from just a lord like any other to the fastest person ever. Even to the point of obtaining the title of Flash Goddess. As the current commander of the secret force, a unit specialized in the use of Shalimpa, she was already used to all feats of speed. She could have accepted it if the man moved so fast that he was invisible. But he is so slow. He wasn't particularly faster than the assailants, he didn't use any Kido either. Despite this, not one of them was even able to touch him, much less wound him. It was as if he was able to see the future. Each of his steps would place him in the most ideal place to either avoid or counter the attacks. Sometimes, he would even make them hit or disturb each other. Even energy-wise, he didn't display an overwhelming power, but rather, he used just the necessary amount of strength each time. The worst? He was doing all this with his eyes covered by a blindfold. The fight didn't take long and ended as simply as it began. All the members of the squad were still surrounding Gojo. After all, he didn't hit them that heavily, and they had been trained to be able to fight even with crippling wounds. Still, even though they weren't all that wounded, their ego was nearly destroyed. This fight was simply one of the greatest humiliations they had ever suffered from. Omida, who was the vice captain of the 2nd Division, frowned when seeing them act like this and was about to step forward. However, he was stopped from doing so by a movement of Soifan's hand. Captain. Shut up. She was looking at Gojo with an unprecedented serious expression. She didn't know how strong he really was, but he was without a doubt at least at the level of a mid or high-class vice captain. I will present myself. I am Soifan, the captain of the 2nd Division and the commander of the secret force. What about you? Her tone had completely changed. While Soifan hated frivolous men like Kasuk or this man in front of her, she also put martial prowess above everything. That was why, even though she already knew his name, she still asked it after introducing herself. This was her way of showing respect for someone strong. Gojo was the kind of guy who gave as much respect as he received. He had no reasons to escalate the situation since the captain didn't wish to do so. What's more, he was still in the dark about the situation in this world. Not to mention that antagonizing the army just a few days after coming here wasn't particularly smart. My name is Satoru Gojo, I don't have any fancy title though. E/N, Sorcerer Supreme. I see, then Gojo, do you want to enter the secret force? An hour later, Soifan was sitting while facing Ishin Shiba. Another person she extremely disliked. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly as she wondered why most, if not all the captains in the Gojo 13 were so frivolous. For once, Ishin didn't have his usual goofy expression. After all, he could understand how important the situation was. From what Soifan reported, this man called Satoru Gojo wasn't someone to be trifled with. So, did he accept? He didn't give a clear answer. I guess he wishes to gather more information by going through the academy. Even though Soifan was more or less refused, she didn't particularly mind and in fact, even respected the man even more. Being strong was one thing, but plunging headstrong in a situation without enough information was stupid. Ishin chuckled. It was rare for Soifan to have such a good opinion about a man. Well, in a way our mission can be said to be a success. We have gauged his skills at the very least. As for his intentions, I guess we will have to wait for his school life to observe him more. Ishin decided to stop the mission here. After all, if the man could so easily find a secret squad observing him, no one could spy on him. Well, it's time to give feedback to the old man. Saying so, a black butterfly with purple wings flew before landing on his hand. He spoke quietly to it before sending it away. Those butterflies were called Jigakucho, or hell butterfly, and had many purposes such as being communication tools. Gojo 13, 5th Division. In the center of the Siriidii stood proudly the Gojo 13. In one of the main buildings, with the number 5 inscribed on it, a young man with silver-white hair and an unsettling smile listened to the report from the hell butterfly. In front of him, a seemingly gentle-looking brown-haired man wearing a pair of glasses and a white coat over his Shinigami uniform was doing the same. After a while, once the butterfly vanished, the brown-haired man released a sigh and asked, "So, Jin, what do you think?" Jin Ikamaru, the vice-captain of the 5th Division and the greatest genius in the past 100 years, said, "Captain Aizen, I do not think this is particularly important." Jin said so without breaking his usual smile while he faced his captain, Sasuke Aizen. This is indeed so, but I must admit that this man caught my attention. Satoru Gojo, was it? Adjusting his glasses, Aizen let out a cold smile as he murmured Gojo's name. Things seemed to become interesting. Gojo 13, 11th Division. In the Gojo 13, some divisions had different specialties like the 2nd, 4th, and 12th, while some other divisions were simply geared toward fighting. Out of all the divisions, the 11th was known as the overall strongest, not only because of the battle-hungry members that composed it, but more than anything because of its captain. Zaraki Kenpachi. The 11th Kenpachi. A man who was infamous for his strength and his battle thirst. He was also the sole captain to have reached his rank without even passing through the academy, since he killed the 10th Kenpachi, Kaganjo Kenpachi, under the witness of more than 200 Shinigami. Currently, said Captain, a very tall man with spiked hair and a long scar on the side of his face was laying down on the grass under the sun as he listened to the report. Once it was finished, a fierce grin split his face as his eyes shone with hunger. Next to him, a very young pink-haired girl was crouching down and observing a group of ants. Without having to turn around, she asked, "Kenchan, do you want to have fun?" She was Yuichiro Kusajishi, the vice-captain of the 11th Division and the only one in the world who could call Zaraki like this. After all, she was more or less his adopted daughter. Haha. It seems like an interesting guy will come soon. I hope he will be entertaining. On the side, Yuichiro gave a simple smile. As long as her Kenchan was happy, nothing else mattered in the world. She sincerely hoped that this man was strong enough to make Zaraki even more happy. Rukongai, 1st District, West. The 5th and 11th divisions weren't the only division to receive this piece of news. The report was sent to absolutely all divisions. Each of the captains reacted in different ways. Some were disinterested, some others were curious, and some were wary. But no matter what, one thing was clear. Before even setting foot on the Siriidii, Satoru Gojo was already making waves. Meanwhile, the man of the hour, Satoru Gojo, was smiling blissfully as he ate a delicious cake. His expression seemingly melting in bliss. And, so to be clear, things like high-class or low-class vice captain or such aren't really a thing in Bleach. It's more of a fan-made system. Like how in Naruto people talk about High Kage or Super Kage. Fans of Bleach know without a doubt that even between people of the same rank, the difference of power can be quite startling. For example, for the vice captains, we have Rinji Abarai who is at the level of a captain despite his rank. Meanwhile, for the captains, we have someone like Mayuri who should be at the level of a vice captain. Just to be clear, I am talking about pure power. Otherwise, if we talk about danger level, Mayuri is without a doubt the most dangerous between all captains in my opinion. If he is given enough time he could perhaps create a poison to kill all Shinigami, lol. He is like the Orochimaru of Naruto. Rukongai West Gate. Today, as the sun stood high in the sky, a sea of people wearing rags or simple clothes walked in mass towards the west gate of the Siriidii. A zone they would generally avoid. The reason for this was simple. The test for entering the second session in the academy was about to begin. For most of the souls belonging to the Rukongai, this was the opportunity for them to get rid of the shackles of poverty and obtain a better life. Even though the success rate was incredibly low, they didn't care. They just needed enough power to enter the school. After all, even grunt soldier Shinigami basically lived like a king compared to the life in the Rukongai. In this sea of people, Gojo, who was observing the scenery with Toshiro, could only frown at the disparity. At first glance, the Siriidii and the Rukongai were simply separated by a river. One side reeked of poverty, while another side reeked of opulence. Despite this, the seemingly simple line was nothing more than an illusion. After all, Gojo could see the spherical barrier that was seemingly surrounding the Siriidii. He didn't know exactly how powerful it was, nor what effect it had, but it was clear that it was no game. Gojo adjusted the bandage over his eyes. He had searched for glasses, but the glasses he wore when he was alive were specially made to block absolutely all light. It wasn't something people in the Rukongai could create. Since they didn't have a face mask either, this was the only way to allow his mind to rest a little more. The Rokugan was without a doubt a cheat-like power, but the number of information it constantly sent was pretty overwhelming. After all, even now, despite binding his eyes, he could still technically see. E/N, wouldn't it be better if he just overloaded his senses every now and then to get used to them? As such, he generally needed to block his sight one way or another. So, Toshiro, are you sure you want to do this? Since he was a little bored with the wait, he decided to make a light discussion. Since Momo went back to the academy, the two of them passed most of the time together, and he had to admit that the boy quite grew on him. Though he had to admit the fact that the boy was super talented and was learning everything pretty easily helped a bit. Indeed. You already told me that I had a hidden talent. I don't want to stay useless. Gojo gave a little grin. You don't want Momo to go too far ahead, you mean? It may have been just a few days, but it was easy to see how close Momo and Toshiro were. Their relationship had nothing romantic, but their friendship was extremely pure. Just as he was about to tease Toshiro even more, a loud rumble brought him out of his thoughts. The gate was slowly opening, and what stood behind the gate was a giant. Gojo raised the corner of the bandages covering his eyes and to better observe the man towering above all of them and gave a low whistle. The man raising the gate was a muscular man who easily stood over 9 meters and was very close to 10. What surprised him was how happy the souls seemed to see him, with some of them even waving at him. You guys know him? Indeed. It's Jidanbo. the guardian of the West Gate since more than 300 years ago. He is a friend, and everyone in the Ratongai likes him. Pat? This is interesting. Those of you want to pass the entrance to the academy. The first test is simple. The gatekeeper will release his Ryatsu. Those of you who can go through the gate despite this can enter. Of course, do not worry, he will not go all out, just enough to lower the number of people who do not possess the minimum requirements to even try the test. The one who was speaking was a bearded middle-aged man wearing a black kimono and a book in his hand. You have until this afternoon to reach me, then register your name. I hereby announce the start of the test. I wish you the best of luck. And yes, Toshiro will enter the academy 5 years than initially. This will also change many things since he won't meet Ranjiku like he did in the original. I really like writing FIC because of this. Creating those changes is really interesting.